Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dom and I read and write books. So it's that time of the month where we do a wrap up of the books that I read in July. However, I didn't do one for June, so I'm going to do both months because June is Pride Month and I really want to talk about the books I read that month because so many of them were so good. So we're going to do all of it, which is fine. I only read like about 5 books each month. So overall, it's like what a lot of people's normal 1 month wrap up would be. So let's start with June. The first book I read, I ended up reading or listening to on audiobook, but I loved it so much that I got a physical copy, and that's Felix Ever After. This book follows Felix, Love, who is a trans boy who has, ironically, never been in love, who is being bullied by some anonymous person at his school. While trying to figure it out, he's also exploring his identity and looking to fall in love for the very first time. I absolutely adored this book. I'm pretty sure it was almost a 5-star read. It was about a 4.5-star read. And the only reason it wasn't a 5-star read for me was because sometimes I felt like Felix was annoying. But overall, I really loved his story. All of the characters in this book are really interesting, but my favorite character probably has to be his best friend, Ezra. He had so many layers to him for somebody who was just a side character, and he ended up being the most interesting person in the story. I would read this book 10 times over just for Ezra alone, but I would just read it for the vibes. It's immaculate, and they have Pride happen in the book, so it was perfect to go along with Pride in real life. So that was the first book I read. It's not the first book I started. I started this book during May, which is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, where I read a lot of books that were from Asian perspectives. I wish I would have did a wrap up of that month as well because I read a lot of good stories, but I ended up starting It's Not Like It's a Secret because it followed a young Asian girl who is also trying to figure out her identity as she has her, not first, but like her biggest crush on somebody at her new school. So it kind of follows her as she moves through starting a relationship with a girl and trying to figure out how to come out to her very strict parents. I absolutely hated this book. I found that there was so much racism in this book, and it was absolutely unnecessary. And the worst part is like, I understand that some books have racism and it's there to show us something or add to the characters. No, the main character would say racist things, and at no point did she learn why it's not okay to say those things. And she was dating another person of color. Her girlfriend was part of the Latinx community, and she would just say these things and do these things that were very almost derogatory towards this girl that she claimed to care about so much. And her mother, oh my god, okay, so the first time they said something, I was like, okay, she's gonna teach her mom that she can't say these things about black and brown people, that it's not okay. No, at no point does her mom learn that she is absolutely wild with the things that are coming out of her mouth. And it's not just the main character. It was like most of the characters in this book said out of pocket things. I was shook. Like, I kept waiting for the life lesson where somebody was like, you can't say this. And I get that there are books like that where people don't learn to be better and they're just racist, which is fine. But this is a YA romance. It's a YA romance. There's no need for it. So this book just ended up pissing me off, and I struggle bus through the whole book. I think it took me about like 12 days or so to read this book because I just kept putting it down and picking up other stuff because I really was just getting so stressed out by this book. So yeah, that was a 2.75 I think for me, so I guess I didn't hate it that much. I'm gonna end up giving it away because I don't even want to own it. I'm never gonna read it again, and this is a constant problem for me. I'll buy books without fully even knowing if I'm gonna like them just so I can own them. So the next book I read was on audiobook as well because I was heavy into knitting. I don't know why. but I just woke up one random day and I was like, I want to knit. So I bought a bunch of knitting needles, bought a bunch of yarn, and I would just sit there for hours knitting while listening to audiobooks. So I listened to the No Girlfriend Rule, which is another YA lesbian romance, but the diversity in this one was actually good. I will say it had a common problem to It's Not Like It's a Secret, where there was a character who was just saying the wildest things and never got put in their place. And I just think this is like a crazy concept for a YA book, especially a romance, because aren't we supposed to get rainbows and everything works out in the end and everybody learns to be a better person? At least that's what I look for when I'm reading romances and people are fat phobic or racist or transphobic. I expect that at some point they get put in their place. And that happened in Felix Ever After. There was a character who was transphobic and she got put in her place, but there was a character who was fat phobic continuously and no one ever said anything to him, and that really bothered me. So I picked up this book because the main character is plus size, and I'm trying to read as many plus size romances as I can so I can make a video about good ones that you should pick up. And I like this one because she starts off in a relationship with a boy and she doesn't even really know that she's attracted to girls. And by the end of the book, we never really give her an identity. So it's not one of those ones where she had to like name and figure out who she was. It was just about her exploring this romantic feeling that she had with a girl. And the other thing I really liked about this book, it was like a D&D kind of story. They made up their own game, but it was pretty much D&D. And we got to see their gameplay play out throughout the book. And that added a layer of excitement to something that could have just been very stagnant, because we're just watching this girl not only find confidence, but explore a feeling that she has. But it was good, and it's definitely a YA LGBTQI2S romance that I would recommend, because it's not like her identity is the center of the story. It's more so like her growing to be comfortable as a person and the journey that comes along with that of realizing that she may like girls is what brings us to the resolution. So I wanted to shake it up. So I ended up reading this horror book, Camp Damascus, which is a horror book about a gay conversion camp. And if that doesn't sound scary to you, then I don't know how else to explain this book, because how deep and dark it goes is a little bit scary. Not only is it a crazy idea that people can hate gay people so much that they would go to the extreme of sending them to a conversion camp, this specific conversion camp is next level. So the fact that this was a real life setting added an extra layer of horror to it that was just like chef's kiss. The next book I read, I kind of listened to on audiobook as well, because I was, like I said, very heavy in my knitting phase, and it's In Deep Waters. I tried starting this last year and I just wasn't in the mood for it, but I'm really happy I went back to it because it was a really interesting fantasy book. It's a standalone fantasy, so it's not one where you're like committing to a series, but the standalone aspects of it were really played out very well. I kind of wish it was a series, because the main character has like 4 or 5 siblings, and I could have read a book following every single one of them. And I think because it was a standalone, there were certain aspects that felt rushed, but other ones were really well done, and by the end of the story it was wrapped up really nicely. It had some good magical lore to it, and it had enough adventure that it was fast-paced enough that it kept my attention the entire time. And one of the main characters was so absolutely adorable that he just made the story for me. The next book I read, this is the second book I've read from this author, and I really enjoy her, so she's almost becoming an auto-buy author for me. I know I'm going to read another one of her books that she has published, because it's the second book in this series that I was reading from her. It's a companion series, so I don't have to read it, but I really enjoy her writing, and what I really enjoy about her books is that there's no third act breakup. She does a great job of putting the couple through struggles without making them do something stupid like a miscommunication trope. But this book was Outdrawn, which is a rivals to lovers story of these two girls who are working at the same like comic book company, and they're both writers and artists, and they have to work together but also work against each other in a competition. So it's very hard for them to like each other. And this is definitely Golden Retriever and Black Cat energy, and the way they play off of each other was really well done. So that's all the books I read in June. I said in a previous video that I had this weird thing going on where I was reading a lot of books within the first 2 weeks of the month, and then I would completely fall off and not read anything for the last 2 months. So I was really thinking that this was going to be like an 11 book month, because I read all of these books within like the first week and a half of Pride Month. And then I got to Cemetery Boys, and I don't know if it's because I had to go to Toronto with my mom to visit my brother, but I just couldn't read, and then I just fell off entirely. I still enjoy the books that I did read, and it's not like we don't read queer all year long, so I will get to the rest of the books that I kind of had in my mind that I wanted to read that month, because I don't have to stop just because it's not June anymore. So going into July, once again, this was another month where I read and then just fell off entirely, and I started with DUFF. In high school, this book had a grip on me. I don't know if it's because it was one of the only books that had plus size representation, which I don't even know if she was plus size anymore. I think she was just not super skinny. And I absolutely loved it because of that. But rereading it, this is like those books that you like loved in the early 2000s, and you reread it and you're like, oh, this is kind of low-key terrible. Like, the main character is kind of judgmental AF, and she's not a very nice person, but we're still supposed to root for her, which I do, because she has a lot of struggles that she's going through, and she's fighting through these unresolved feelings when it comes to not only her friends but her family and her love life, and that puts her on a very interesting journey. I wouldn't say there's a lot of sex because it's not on page, but there's a lot of sex in this book. So I think that's definitely wild for YA and something that you wouldn't necessarily see a lot of. The next book I read, because I said I was trying to read plus size books to try and talk about plus size romances that I would recommend, was Savvy Sheldon Feels Good as Hell. And I'm not going to lie to you, I really wish I wouldn't have read this book. This book took me like 15 days to read because it was very boring. The amount of time that we watched her play tennis was just so unnecessary, because like we got the point the first time she's getting back into something she loved in high school. There's absolutely no reason for you to show us every single session that she had, and not like, oh, I went to tennis today and I had a great workout. It was like vivid detail of the entire tennis session. The other thing I couldn't stand about this book is there was like 100 characters. Every place she went, there was characters, and there was like 4 characters that got names. I can't keep up with that. And then we wouldn't see them again. They would be there for a little bit, and then they would just be like gone. And I was like, was it necessary for me to get 4 names from the people at the hair salon if I'm never going to see them again? But I don't know. It was a weird romance. I wouldn't even classify it as romance. I'd more so classify it as woman's fiction with like a romance subplot. But I didn't care about her journey because a lot of it seemed pointless to me, and I don't think it helped her grow. Some people hated this book on Goodreads because they thought that it was not fatphobic, but pushing this wrong idea, because there is an aspect of the book where she's trying to get a revenge body, like where she's trying to lose weight to prove that she's worthwhile. But I didn't consider it to be a problem, because by the end of the book she was able to admit that there was nothing wrong with her. So I didn't think it was a big deal that a huge aspect of the story was her trying to get healthy, because I don't necessarily think it was about her trying to lose weight or pushing the idea that she couldn't be healthy at the size that she was. But that bothered a lot of people, on top of the constant tennis that they played. So I read my first mafia romance last year and fell in love with the genre. And I read the first 2 books in the Prince of the Brotherhood series, but there was a third book that I didn't get to, and I read it this month in July, and it was good. I think the author K. Alex Walker is really good at writing these scary but loving men, and also setting up enough dark action in the story that it definitely screams mafia, almost thriller-esque, but still keeping it in its romance bag. And she put me in such a mood that every book I almost chose after that was chasing the same high that this book gave me. But I only have read mafia romances by her, so I was scared to read any other author because I was terrified that I wasn't going to like them as much. So I decided to pick up a book that looked more like something I would enjoy, that had enough ideas to it that it seemed like it was going to be still within that realm. So I ended up reading Roaming Holiday, which follows a girl who finds out she's a princess. I'm not going to talk much about this because I did an entire vlog on it, but it did have the action that I was seeking, and it definitely gave me the vibes I was looking for, and I really enjoyed the book, and I don't understand why it doesn't have more ratings on Goodreads because it was really well done. So I'm going to rave about this book on social media until more people pick it up because it's definitely worth praise. So still wanting that type of vibe, I decided to pick up another mafia romance, and exactly what I feared happened. I did not enjoy it at all, and I was mostly confused throughout the story. I'm not going to harp on it because I talked about it on all my platforms, including this one, but it was absolutely a mistake to read that. And as a palate cleanser, to try and like step away from that world because it was just so not my thing that it made me, like, it woke me up from my mafia obsession, I decided to read a small town romance. And Talia Hibbert never goes wrong. I've read, I think, including these 3 that I've read over July and August, I've read 7 of her books, and I've loved every single one of them. And she's just an auto-buy author for me. I will pick up everything that she makes. I have books from her that I'm still waiting to read because every single book gives me what I'm looking for, and most of them have plus-size representation. So a girl like her had really great spectrum representation because the main character is autistic, and she talks about it openly, and it's not like something that she's grappling with or she doesn't like about herself. It's almost like something that she's proud of, and the way it was written was really well done. What I really liked was the banter between the main characters. I think they bounced off of each other really well, and she was very like grumpy and dark and snarky, and he was very like golden retriever and happy and sweet, and they were still able to like go back and forth in a way that was absolutely satisfying. It was a 5-star read for me. It was so good that I ended up picking the next book in the series like right after it, and I just finished all 3 books within like 5 days. But that was the last book I finished in July. The next book, Untouchable, I didn't end up finishing until August 1st, so that will be in the next video, but it was really good. So those are the books I read in June and July. I really enjoyed June because I got to read a lot of queer voices, and it reminded me how much I like reading books from different perspectives. So that's definitely going to shape how I move forward through the rest of the year. And I'm going to try and diversify my reading enough that I continue on that journey. Like I said, May was Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I read only books by people of that ethnic group, and so I have been on a continuous path of reading outside of just black and white romance books, and I want to continue that journey. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate every single one of you. I look forward to the next video, and I hope you have a good day, and even though I'm late, happy Pride. Bye.